Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the MLS Now podcast. I'm your host, Russell. You can find me on social media at Mr. Dangerous. But more importantly, since you're listening to the podcast, you can find the podcast on social media at MLS Now Podcast. We have another phenomenal, exciting, wonderful, depending on what kind of fan you are, this might even be a stressful or worrying preseason preview. Today we have FC Cincinnati, a ton of FC Cincinnati stories in the media lately, a lot going on this offseason, and here to talk about FC Cincinnati, near and dear to many Cincinnati fans' hearts, but mine especially. We have Mr. Nate Hale. You can find him on social media at Nino1. Nate, it's good to have you here.
You too, buddy. Come on, you Gunners.
Yeah, that's, you know what? I'm glad you said that. And it's a shame that Gavin's not here, but I am convinced that most of the podcast is also Gunners fans. So
that's
clearly
smart people.
Right. Look, we have good taste. We follow MLS, which is a exciting league. You never know what's going to happen. And we follow Arsenal, which is, unfortunately, we don't know what's ever going to happen with Arsenal.
It's a soap opera, man. It's a soap opera. Good and bad. You get your highs, you got your lows. But, in Arteta, we trust.
That's right. Yeah, in Arteta and in the academy, too. I mean.
Yeah, Hale in, buddy. There's by design, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
But unfortunately, we can't talk Arsenal all day. We have to talk about something much more dramatic, which is the off-season and now upcoming 2025 season for FC Cincinnati. So, Nate, I'm gonna go with the lowest hanging fruit, the easiest of easy questions that isn't actually so easy. A lot of drama in the off-season. Quick summary of it, I think, is in order. But then my follow-up question to that is, what do you think will be the biggest impact from this offseason, either in terms of players in, players out, storylines, whatever?
Quick summary. More of the same, sadly enough, if you follow the tea leaves. A lot of ins, a lot of outs. Whether that be former players from a couple years ago, like Alvaro Barrial, who finally got announced going to Santos today, or new faces coming in, like Kevin Denke from, Cercle Bruges in Belgium, Golden Boot winner, a guy that had the opportunity to go to different clubs in Europe. Right now, down in Clearwater, the team's got, 13 to 14 outfield players, maybe? 1.5 to 2 goalkeepers, depending on how you do math. So it's interesting. First 2 preseason matches, we don't know much about them because the club refuses to put them, on broadcast or for social media to access outside of their, I guess, what I would call Carter, their club historian or something.
Yeah. Club historian is a good term. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, current club historian is probably the best term, but we don't know what we're going to get. That's the funny thing. So that's the off season so far. The biggest, I guess, noise, you could look at it positively or negatively. I'm going to go glass half full and go Kevin Denke, who was, about a week ago was the MLS record incoming transfer until Atlanta did the Home Depot bucks and said, Latte Lath come in. But looking forward to him. Hopefully he lands on the right feet, but there's so much behind that is still unknown and uneven. So if to this point, from a excitement standpoint, gut feeling told me 2025 was going to be different. It was going to be the year. And that could still be the case, but, man, like right now I'm like at a 6 teetering 7, just looking forward to the season and seeing how it all kind of plays out.
I notice you very tactfully danced around maybe the big storyline that's been coming out in the last, I would say, week and a half, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. There's been a number of players that have held out for Cincinnati as the preseason got underway, but notably Lucho Acosta. I think if you're the glass half full guy, I'll be the glass half empty and say it's drawn eyes and attention, but not in a good way. it's not something that fans are excited to see because you never want to see a captain. You never want to see, a club legend or an all-star or, an important player leave, let alone potentially leave in the way that's going on here with all the controversy. And, he's been in the press talking to reporters and he's been on, ESPN and different shows all throughout the off season. And it's like, it we said it earlier about Arsenal. It's a soap opera. It's with Lucho Acosta right now. It's a soap opera.
I mean, that's just South America, man. That's South American players. I mean, look at Neymar. Like, I mean, what did he do in Saudi Arabia? He played 2 matches and made $50 million. I mean, you take that with a grain of salt. I think Lucho's aspect and Lucho's situation is tough because club legend, without a doubt, in my opinion, the best player we've ever had. Arguably, you could argue top 20 in MLS history. I think that's a good number, 20. Um, you know, if he would have stuck around and put his head down, we'll leave it at that. He's probably going to set a goals and assists combined record. He's going to flirt with Landon Donovan's numbers if he played 2 or 3 more years in this squad. That's not going to happen for multiple reasons. But ending last year after the playoff loss to NYCFC, coming out immediately after, and yeah, he's emotional, saying, like, this is potentially my last game for the club. Kind of caught everybody off guard because just 12 months prior, he spent his own dime to take out a full-page ad in the newspaper that this is my city, after the 4-3 comeback win against Philly, So, Lucho, I love him forever. His thing with Laurel Failer getting interviewed saying, kind of trying to throw Albright under the bus for better or worse. And if that's, all on Albright, I think there's, it goes both ways. But I think Lucho kind of just said, all right, man, it's his goodbye, even though he literally said it's not his goodbye, but I think that was his goodbye. Yeah, I'll love Lucho, but I think you can agree to this, Russ, that in moments the game was about him more than about his team. That's a fair statement, not a derogatory statement, but the spotlight was on him. He knew it. He played into it. Sometimes it was amazing. The goal versus Charlotte, where he took on 3, 4, 5 defenders from midfield and came down and, like, goal of the year. Like, I watched that live. I was behind the net. I have never seen a player do that live. Just having fun, dominating. And his teammates were shocked that he did it. But then you have moments where, he gets his second yellow and gets sent off in the 70th minute because he's barking at the ref over tactical fouls or chippy fouls. Like, sometimes it's better just put your head down and keep going. So I will say this with Lucho, in whether, again, love him for everything that he did, but I think his play style and mentality at times limited the team. We had to play through him last year. In what? We had our points per game, our last 10 matches or 15 matches was less than 1, limping into the playoffs, as you say, and we were 3rd in the East. The first round exit was not a surprise. Lucho's form fell off. Granted, it was injury, personal reasons, whatever it was, the second half of last year. First half, he was the MVP like he was in 23, but the second half of 24 was very much an Achilles heel for the team. And I think he started half the matches down the stretch. He came off the bench. He was playing 15, 20 minutes at a time. Again, for injury, fair, but I don't know, it didn't end or didn't come out the way we hoped or wanted. And I don't know that it's necessarily time to turn the new page, but his comments with Laurel the other day kind of forced the new page, whether he likes it or not. So I love him forever. I'd build a statue. I would hug the man if I saw him in person. But it might be time to move on. So that's kind of my take.
Yeah, I think that's a relatively level-headed take. I mean, we talk about referees sometimes making the match about them. Your take about Lucho, it's very spot on. I mean, how many times, and look, we're at the same matches, we're seeing the same thing on the field. How many times does Lucho, give up on a play because, the ball wasn't played to him and he stops all of a sudden, he's throwing his hands up and gesticulating at his teammates and complaining. And, it's like, and then there was maybe a mistake from the other team. And it's like, Lucho, if you had just continued the play, maybe you capitalize on that mistake, and now you're in position to either set up a goal or score yourself. But you stopped and you gave up on the play, and it hurt the team because of it, because you didn't get it your way. You wanted to be the guy.
And again, man, that's South American soccer, South American football. I mean, a lot of it is. There's, that's what gets those guys out of their countries, gets them on the bigger stages, gets them to Brazil, to North America, to Europe. The quiet guys blend in, the boisterous guys stand out. So I don't fault him for it, but from a team perspective, especially in MLS, because there are very few players in MLS that truly dominate the game. Even Europe's tough, but really dominate. It's a team sport more than anything. And with Lucho, I'd say half the time was about him, half the time was about the team. And if you're, subscribe to Queen City Press and what Laurel put out there, he barked a lot about his former teammates. And that was his frustration, that the Barrials were gone, that the Assads were gone, the Santi Ariases were gone. And, I don't know if that's just him venting or him not truly understanding how this chaotic league works, in the sense that, it's a salary cap league. It's built to create parity. We talked before we started recording about the Galaxy, how a team can go from, granted, historically the Galaxy have been great, but the last 4 or 5 years, the Galaxy have been ass. And they won MLS Cup. They were great because of the way the league's built and the parity and the quick turnover. So it's, again, a tough pill to swallow, but my hope is that the soap opera is over before it starts. Let's get it done. Let's move on. Let's move on to different, if not greener pastures. And let's bring Evander to Cincy.
So I think normally I would ask this as a last sort of topic, which is what would make you panic, or what's keeping you up at night. But I have a suspicion that what you just said might be the what keeps you up at night, which is if this goes on and on and on, and we get to April and it still isn't resolved, because that would scare me as a Cincinnati fan.
I think it's to April. Granted, it's February now. The season starts in 2.5, 3 weeks. Got, CONCACAF Champions Cup and then a home match versus the Red Bulls. I don't think they'll linger on that long. The one thing we're blessed with in Cincy is an ownership that is vested, that cares, and it's not always about the mighty dollar. At the end of the day, it is, but at the same time, they'll splash the cash. We saw Bupenza last year, which was a historic mistake by a GM. Again, not taking a shot at Albright, but it is what it is. Red flags were there. You spent the money. The guy was a dumpster fire in a spotlight, and we moved on. We got a little lucky with the mutual termination, the league terminating the contract because the guy just stopped showing up to stuff. But, you look at that. You look by a regime with Nijkamp and bringing in Brenner and what they spent on him. They took a little bit of loss on Brenner. Okay, we moved on. There's been multiple players we've spent money on that have not worked out, and we've moved on. So what keeps me up tonight, I don't think Lucho will be here. Man, I'd be surprised if he's here into March, because he still has value within the league. He's still an amazing player. There's still teams like Dallas, like Houston, that need that type of player, that have the roster space and the budget space to spend and get there. So if the whole move to Argentina doesn't play out, which it most likely won't, there's still options within the league. It might not be Lucho's favorite place to land, but he's still going to get it paid. MLS is a single entity league. His contract's still going to be valid. He's still going to make $4.5 million a year, which is more than he's going to make anywhere else. And he may get a fresh start. Hopefully, again, it's a Western Conference team. I would gladly tune into Dallas games and watch Lucho if if FCC isn't playing or we're off, or it's a Sunday game or whatever it may be. So I just hope it's done sooner than later. If it lingers into March and April, we're in trouble, because that means we don't have the roster space to bring in somebody else. We're not compliant right now, and we have 4 or 5 spots to fill, more or less. So a lot is riding on getting this Lucho deal done, whether it's outside the league, inside the league. So it's not the best situation to be in. What keeps me up at night, I don't know that keeps me up at night. I mean, I'm used to it, man. I'm an FCC fan. I
You're a
got
Cincinnati fan. You follow the
facts.
Bengals, the Reds.
Bearcats. I mean, I've got spoons to share, and disappointment to dwell back on. So it keeps things in perspective. So none of this team will keep me up at night. But hey, man, I'm looking forward to the season. I really wish for once we'd have an off season that was just all positive. And we really haven't had that in in our MLS history. I mean, outside of coming in the league in 2019 where, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and here we go. In our first home match, we dominate Portland with 3-0 at home with, Alan Cruz with a backheel goal, Matthew Duplan with a goal. I mean, it couldn't be written up any better, but I don't know that anything on this team will really keep me up at night, but I don't know. There's frustrations to be had. You personally think you could do it better, even though you don't work in the league or you've never been a GM. But that's life. That's being a sports fan. So,
Yeah. Well, what is it? The phrase, stick enough monkeys in a room and eventually they'll write Shakespeare. Get enough Cincinnati fans in a room, we'll figure it out.
well, I've never heard that before, but I like it. Or even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes. Is probably the better one I'll use, but same concept.
Right. Yeah. Well, I need Albright to not be a blind squirrel when he comes to signing players because I need him to hit more frequently than that.
I mean, he's been pretty accurate. He's done well. I mean, we just moved 2 center backs to Colorado. He's hit on Orishano. Lucia wasn't his guy or his prior regime, but really outside of Bupenza, he hasn't missed a whole lot. And I don't know if that's so much McCarthy on my head, but so much Albright or the staff he has behind him. I don't think Hunter Freeman, who works directly behind Albright, or McCarthy, who's kind of the analytical guy. A lot of credit kind of goes under the radar to those guys. Hunter Freeman, I think, honestly, half the teams in the league could scoop him up right now, and he would be better than what they have in their front office. That's a credit to the ownership of FCC to recognizing that talent and keeping him in-house. But if Albright left today, devil's advocate, I think we might waver here and there, but I think we might be better off because there's benefit to say, yeah, Albright knows MLS, this, that, and the other, but he's fleeced some teams. On my own personal podcast, I liken him to a car salesman in the sense that he's out for blood, trying to make as much money in a transaction that he could. But in doing that, when the team that got fleeced realizes, man, that sucked, I kind of got took, when you go back to the negotiating table, you're going to do it hesitantly. You're not going to be engaged the way you should be. There's a fine line of benefiting your team, but not leaving your opponent in the corner. So I don't know. It's very interesting to me. I'd rather be in this situation than that of, even San Jose's starting to figure it out. So maybe New England, maybe New England. Maybe Chicago, kind of. You got Triple G in there, and you're spending money, but you've spent money in the past, and that hasn't worked out. I don't know, man. Nashville, I don't want to talk shit about every team, but even the guys in Nashville, they're really high hopes on this season, but what's changed? You've got God, I don't want to be mean, but we'll just call a spade a spade. You got Sam Surridge, who, good on him. He's an okay striker, but it's not like he's got a history like Latte Lath, who has at least done something. You got Schaffenberg, who's cool haircut. He's a violent player, but is he gonna dominate week in and week out? And you've got an aging Ani Mukhtar. So I don't know. It's the leagues. There's so much parity. It's fun. It's fun to watch, fun to follow. So
yeah, man, absolute scenes when someday Hani's gonna get in one of those cash for player trades.
I don't think. Where does he go? If that was that, well, again, devil's advocate. Where does he go within the league at his age with what he's doing? He's had a few years. He's Still been very talented, but he's disappeared more often than appeared outside of his
Yeah.
first year or two. Nashville's been such a defensive team. They've relied on that and Walker Zimmerman in the back line. And then it's like, all right, we'll get the ball to Haney and hopefully he creates a la FCC with Lucho to an extent. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
Teams are
Haney,
getting wise to it.
well, yeah, I mean, shut down Haney and score a goal or two, and you're safe. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, so here, let me transition us a little bit onto maybe something more lighthearted, I'll say, which is the world of social media. Nate, when you look on social media and you see the average fan, right? We're dialed in. We see a lot of FC Cincinnati. We see a lot of the good. We also see a lot of the bad. What's the average fan see?
Um, Balloons, fireworks, Zach Brown coming to TQL.
Hey, I'll tell you right now, the fireworks shows the FCC rolled out towards the end of the
Oh, they're
season,
good.
those were
They're good.
fun.
They're good, man. But
Yeah.
I've never been a fireworks guy. You can blow so much shit up in the sky so many times, and it's like I've seen that before. So the average FCC fan, if you want to kill a half hour, find an FCC fan book or Facebook page and just read comments, replies. It's painful and entertaining at the same time. But I don't know, like the when we think about Cincinnati sports, we're mid-market, small market, but you got the Bengals, right? You have an NFL franchise who's been in the spotlight recently. You have the Reds, who have been historically a great team the past couple of decades, not so much, but a young core that's entertaining with Ellie De La Cruz. FCC, who's kind of the new kid on the block, but has made noise because they've been the most successful over the past few years. It's a unique landscape with the average fan. It's a casual fan, and credit to the team, credit to the front office. They play into that. That's how they make their bread and butter. It's a fan. TQL is a great family environment stadium. It's a lot of the guys that don't pay attention to the team Monday through Friday, but we got a game on Saturday, and it's just that they don't know who left, who came in, how was training, who's mad at whose agent did this, all that kind of stuff. They just show up to TQL on a Saturday. It's a good environment, family friendly. It's exciting. It's loud. They have a good time. They go home, and we'll do it again next weekend or the weekend after. So that's the average fan. Is it good for the league? I think so. From a growing standpoint, if we like into like the Premier League or some of the, even South America, even Mexico, Central America, as the fan base gets wiser to the ins and the outs, as the average fan gets more ingrained to, oh, this player's coming, this player's going, the roster rules, so on and so forth, I think it's going to be tough for the FCC to navigate because they've leaned into that average fan so much. And granted, it got us here, right? It got us to MLS. It got TQL built. But it's a tough thing to navigate, and I think the club's really going to need somebody in the front office that understands both sides of the aisle, because if not, they're going to continue to put their foot in their mouth, and you're going to piss off the avid fan. You're going to piss off the diehard who sees through the chalk or the smoke and realizes, hey, you guys aren't exactly innocent. So stop playing like you are and own what you've done, because that's one thing FCC is. Until they're forced to do so, and that's any sports franchise, any professional franchise, until they're forced to do so, they'll make their money where they can make their money, but they won't look themselves in the mirror and say, we didn't do so good or we did this wrong. Time to own up for it. So I love it. I love looking at Facebook. I last about 30 seconds before I have to delete a comment before posting it, because what's best case, worst case? Best case, I get my point across. Worst case, I get a bunch of idiots barking back at me, and I don't have the time for that. So that's my wholehearted take on the average fan.
That's fair. Hey, and on, I guess, the topic of average fan, FC Cincinnati fans might have seen, if they're on social media, Larry Sunderland had posted just a reply about generations in other countries, and I think Catalonia was the subject of it, but players there have had their parents, they've had their grandparents and so on imparting soccer knowledge and soccer history and, concepts and ideas about the sport into them for so long. And I think maybe what's interesting is that the average fan, like, we would be the start of imparting that to any kids that we would have, because that's the league's only been around for 20 years.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, what, 1995, 96? So you're coming up on it in the sport itself. I mean, it's just like baseball. I think soccer and baseball are a good comparison in the sense it's a very tactical game. It's a very calculated game. And you get different kind of fans for every kind of sport. NFL fans are very loud. They're very boisterous. But a lot of that is just the look at me kind of aspect. Soccer fans, you get that too, but you also get the fan that's analytical, that's understanding formations, how you're going to play. Are you playing 3 at the back, 4 at the back, 5 at the back? The 4-4-2. I mean, different formations and how that plays out and how it counteracts your opponent. So it's, are you going to play possession game or are you going to hit me on the break? So that comes with age. That comes with youth and playing the game. And we're lucky in Cincinnati that a lot of the younger Cincinnati crowd is very ingrained in the game in soccer. But yeah, it'll be interesting as it grows and how it kind of changes. And I mean, hopefully I can last as long as I can last and watch it and learn from it and have fun with it. So
yeah. Look, Nate, in like 60 years from now, you're still going to be in the Bailey, and you're going to be like that. You're going to be that fixture.
If I'm 100 years old in the Bailey, I've had that thought process because I will look. I mean, I'm 42. I've had multiple friends in the Bailey that are in their 60s and 70s. Even my season ticket rep was like, "Man, how long are you going to stick out in there?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm not old. I'm in pretty good physical condition. I do that on purpose." But I mean, yeah, I probably got another 20 years in the Bailey if the wife lets me and doesn't fight me on it. And I mean, the cheapest ticket in the house is always good by me. So,
well, I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed for 60 more years in the Bailey for you. We want you to get like your own statue in the Bailey.
Did you have to change like the stairs? So I have like my own little wheelchair thing where it, like wheels me down to row 5.
I'm pretty sure they've got something in like the upper rows. They can build that. Yeah, they can get something down there for you.
I don't want to be up there. I want to be down there, man.
Yeah. You know what? Just tell them to move the entrance to the Bailey to like row 5, so you can wheel out to row 5 when you're like 102, and then
it'll be fun. We'll make it work.
And then everyone else just climbs up.
It'll be work. Maybe at that point I own the club, and then it's a whole different conversation.
So, right. At that point you're getting wheeled into like the suites. So
I'll be on the pitch, buddy.
You'll be on the pitch suites. There you go.
I'll be flicking off Hugo Lloris's third nephew, saying Tottenham is shit from the side of the pitch.
Oh, that would be on brand. I could see it happening.
Yeah.
All right. Well, how about this? Let's keep these good long-term thoughts. We're gonna keep on manifesting. Nate, let's look ahead to December 6th or 10th or wherever, right? FC Cincinnati is in MLS Cup finals. We're going wild. It's crazy. We're in TQL. We're actually hosting it. Everyone's losing their minds and they're thinking back to the season as a whole. And they're like, oh man, like everything just went right for us this year, except like when you think about the big 3 events that would go right for Cincinnati to have a super successful season. What are those events?
Pretty simple, man. Actually, that's a very simple question for me because I've had that thought. We get Lucho sold. Find him a good landing spot. We capitalize as a club. That opens up some roster space. We then bring in Evander, who, in my opinion, is a top 5 talent within the league in his prime. So now you got 2 DPs, and Evander and Denke. You bump Oroshano to make him happy. Get him to buy in to a paper DP, as they say, or low-level DP that can be bought down. See how he plays in the first half. If he plays well, hey, buddy, you ultimately wanted more money. You ultimately wanted Europe or Mexico. We find him a spot in the winter. or the winter, I say, in the summer. And then you open up that third DP spot and we bring another attacking mid, because really you got Danke up top and Evander, who's kind of like a false nine, and you bring in that attacking mid because it's much easier to do in the summer than it is right now, especially right now after the European window is closed. And you bring in that third DP and this club hits its stride, because defensively with Miazga, Miles, teenage, we get a little bit more depth at center back, but maybe Hayes comes back to old form, so on and so forth. Defensively, we should be strong. And the three things are Lucho gone, Evander in, or Ashano out, and that third DP in the summer really moves the needle. I'm trying to think of what to liken it to. Like, give me last year. What was a DP that came in the summer that really moved the needle for our team?
Ooh, but summer was so slow.
It was
Thinking
this
back
past
to it,
year. I mean, it
yeah.
was really, but the one thing I will say to FCC is they do their homework. They've got targets, they've got a list, they've got a big board. Then maybe somebody's available, whoever that is. But you bring in that attacking mid. It's kind of, I don't know what would fit with this team. But if you had Evander and Denke up top with three at the back, three center backs and wing backs, and Yedlin and Engel or Angel, however you want to say it, who's not announced yet, with Obi at the back, Buka as your 8. I mean, you've got so much flexibility within that team. Granted, everybody's got to stay healthy, but a true, I don't want to say a true attacking mid, but almost like a favorable 8. That does have some defensive capability. I mean, dude, that team with Evander and Denke up top, with you can earn possession or also hit on the break, the strong back line that knows the league, that's disciplined, that's tenured. I mean, the sky's the limit, but things really have to fall into place. And there's so many dominoes. I mean, if you anyone that pays attention to soccer-wise this morning, I mean, Lucho's the first domino, then Evander, then so on and so forth for a third of the league. These moves really are going to define what happens. So we just need to see Lucho move sooner than later. Again, I want him to find a home that fits him and makes him happy and his family happy. But I want Evander here. All things I've been told are he's eager and willing to come here. He's excited about the project. I mean, what's Evander, 26?
Yeah.
Yeah. So another 3 years here. Denke's here for another 4 or 5 on paper. I mean, dude, that's 2 players that could be MLS best 11 year in and year out. It'd be cool. It's as hard as it is to do within MLS to build your own kind of big red machine for any of your Cincinnati fans that kind of understand, you can get there. And I don't know. So those are the big pieces, but they have to fall, and they have to fall soon to have it kind of work.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to characterize it as dominoes waiting to fall. Because in talking with the folks over in Dallas, they're also kind of in a holding position, trying to wait to see what happens with Evander. And it's they want to wait on him. They want to see if the Cincinnati play ends up happening. And once that happens, then they have other ideas and other places to go. But, holding out hope. And it's and then Portland, in theory, they already have a replacement found. And so, it's this one move, right, for Lucho suddenly might impact 4 other teams signing players.
That week's going to be a blast because, it's just going to be boom, 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 boom. But if Lucho doesn't move and Portland is forced to take a lower offer, i.e. Dallas, then what happens? And then, vice versa. If you're stuck with Lucho here, who wants to be here on paper but doesn't want to be here, fighting versus the club, I mean, the next 2 to 3 weeks are going to be, as they say, cinema. So.
Right. I look forward to it being nominated for, best screenplay at the Oscars.
If only the league had better media press and ways to get voices out there outside of as much as I love them, but the third parties like ourselves kind of covering it because it falls to the wayside.
Yeah. I mean, how cool would it be to just, you can turn on ESPN and you'll get like college basketball, and then you'll get like the college softball, World Series and all this stuff way in depth with experts that you didn't even know existed. Like, how cool would it be to if someone or somewhere was doing that for MLS?
They did it for a while, but once ESPN gave up on MLS once Apple stepped in, and then that's ESPN's downfall. But you know, that's a different conversation for a different day.
Right.
Yeah.
It would be a fun conversation for a different day, though.
Yeah, if you're going to be honest about it, it'd be a very fun conversation. But so what about you? What are your thoughts? I mean, you're an MLS guy. You're a Cincinnati guy. What's the three dominoes for you? We'll switch it on you, and you're the host, but we'll put the host on the spotlight.
Ooh, well, so I would agree with you. I think Lucho has to be one of the big keys to success in that he's got to get moved. I don't think at this point you can keep the team unified in terms of vision, in terms of players being on the same page. Like, if this much drama has unfolded around one player and they stay on the team, what does that say to every other player on the team?
Right. I mean,
So,
what's best case, worst case?
I mean, best case is everyone rallies around Lucho and says, "Let's go win one for Lucho," and you get like a magical year. But that's not sustainable,
No, no, and I
you
don't think it
know.
happens because I'm sure there's guys on Albright's side that your Miazgas. I'm just speculating, but your Miazgas, your Miles Robinsons that have come here and have been told this, that, and the other, and that's happened. They've been promised something that's happened. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm thinking that's sustainable, even for
Yeah.
6 months. So
Mm-mm. No, I would be surprised if it was sustainable for even 1 month. Like, I I don't see that having any favorable outcome. The worst case on that one, right? Flipping it around is that everything comes crashing down. Every single player is miserable. They play terrible, and the team falls apart like New England did, or like San Jose did.
yeah, well, I mean, there's lots of teams within this league that have had very expensive. Toronto, I mean, look at Toronto. They are the epitome of all the money, none of the results. Individual talent, Bernadeschi's haircut slash cornrows. Um, Man, I loved watching Toronto because there was so much individual talent, but like they lose 4-2, 3 to
Yeah,
1, week in and week out, and a lot of that's leadership at the top and head coaching. And they've had what, 3 head coaches in the last 2 years,
yeah,
and they've had
which is
successful. Yeah, I mean they've had successful head coaches that have come in and kind of righted the ship, and then, not good enough. See you later.
yeah.
So
I mean,
it's
since Greg Vanny left, it's kind of all it's been something to be
it
a
is,
Toronto fan.
which at one point was the best team in the league. I
Yeah,
mean, without doubt, you know. So the Giovinco days was a whole different conversation. So I mean, since he's in a weird spot, a good spot. It's good to be in the spotlight, but I don't know. I like the calm river more than the rowdy river, so to say.
yeah.
Yeah. So
I think going back to your original throwing it back to me, I'd say a second key point is finding a way to be unpredictable. I think we've talked about it with Hani, right? It was starting to become a little bit apparent with Lucho as well, and it happens even with other teams in the league. You know, you have a superstar player on a team, and it becomes the obvious play of, well, just lock down this guy and force them to try something else. And teams don't have any answers to that. So for Cincinnati, Lucho leaving is step one, becoming unpredictable, right? Just because if you bring in Evander, it can't just be Evander. You need Buka to become a legitimate threat in making those line splitting passes and finding Evander and finding Denki and, learning how to bring your wingbacks up at the right time to be that third or even a fourth person who could be running and charging into the box and creating those opportunities. So it's not just, hey guys, mark Denke or mark Evander or mark, this one guy. It's, everyone has to be on their man, or everyone has to be going with the zonal marking. And if you mess up, we're in danger.
Great example is that, as much as it pains me to say it, is the Crew. The past few years. I mean, from outside back to midfield to Cucho and Rossi, or before that, Zelarayan, like they did a really good job of keeping you unbalanced. And then when you slept on this side or that player, surprise, Aiden Morris puts in a banger from 35 yards. So, I mean, that's kind of, sadly, the blueprint. I don't want to give them credit, but, they'll be in Cleveland soon enough, so I feel fine in saying that. But, yeah, I mean, that's the dream, sadly enough, but that's the dream, so.
Well, maybe we can get there. And I think that leads me into my third point here, which is I want to see Noonan really take a step in the 70th minute, 65th minute, and on in matches. Because how often is it that FC Cincinnati will either have a lead going in towards the end of the game and then give it up, or conversely, we don't do anything at all until like the 65th or 70th minute, and then that's when we turn it on. It's like, once again, it's not a sustainable practice. We need to be able to have a consistent performance that doesn't revolve around that substitution change taking place. And it's not even like he's consistent about those substitutions.
No, that's what I was going to
either.
say. It's really about like the planned substitutions. Like, all right, we're going to do this for 60 to 65, maybe 70 minutes. If it works, then we've got plan B in place. And there's been times when I will say he's gotten a little bit better over the last 12 months, year one to year two, about really understanding. And that was kind of the Achilles heel with 2023 and running out of steam in the Eastern Conference Final. Like, he peaked too soon. He could have, he pulled guys that didn't want to be pulled, that had some gas left in the tank, brought in guys who hadn't played at a heavy volume. They ran out of gas. So it was kind of a combination of that. But you're spot on in the sense, like, really seeing a coach and a manager understand tactically. And Noonan has arguably the best staff in MLS. With Dom Kinnear, Kenny Arena. I mean, there's, Paul Rogers. There's some very good talent in this coaching staff. A lot of guys that could leave for greener pastures. How does he take that step to go from, average to tactical genius? Well, that's a good challenge. I mean, that's a great conversation to watch him do it, and watching Noonan, watching his mannerisms. He's our best coach we've had, without a doubt. He's a top 5 to 7 coach in MLS at any given time. Just from what I know about the man, he's he wears his heart on his sleeve. Yeah, like, how do you, it's so weird, man. But how do you optimize Sergio Santos? We can roll our eyes, but how do you optimize that? That's the card you've been dealt. How do you, bring back Corey Burke to make an impact? Who's our backup 10? Who's our 10 right now? But who's the backup? Who subs in for Obi? We Anunga from Nashville, maybe, but how do you bring in the academy players? Our academy's pretty strong right now. I mean, we won the Shield, quote unquote, in MLS Next Pro last year, and then exited in the first round. But how do you optimize those guys and implement them into the first team? And then a lot of it falls on the head coach and the staff itself. So it'll be interesting. That's something I haven't thought a whole lot about, but as we talk through it, Noonan's got a lot to do. I think it separates him to, I hate doing it, but like a Wilfred Nasi. Like, I get you really right, but man, like it's just an easy comparison. I mean, who's the best coach in MLS right now? Best manager? It's Nasi. It's hard to argue against that. Who's number 2? I mean, who's number 2? I'm asking you that question. Who is number 2 right now?
Ooh.
It's not Miami.
I mean,
it's not Miami because they've been given
yeah.
you've been given the talent who already knows how to do what they're doing. Yeah,
Yeah.
who's the other manager that's changing the mold, or not just repeating what they've done at other clubs? There's not many, man. Like a lot of these guys, like Bruce Arena, he's going to San Jose and he's like, this blueprint works. I'm just going to recruit these guys, bring these guys in. I got a ton of GAM or TAM or allocation money because this team has sucked for the better part of 3 years, so I can spend it and we'll be good. We'll be competitive. But is he doing anything differently? No. You mentioned Greg Vanny. You mentioned, Ben Olsen. Like, it's the same playbook. And I think that's a good point to bring up from the growth of the league. Who's going to break the mold outside of Nazi to really push things or change things? Or really, Arteta or pep it to that next level. So that's a
Yeah.
great point, man. It's a great point.
Maybe get like a what is it, Eric Ramsey, the head coach over at Minnesota United.
Minnesota's a weird, not to get too derailed here, but Minnesota's a weird comparison because they've got pieces, but they've also brought in the wrong pieces. They brought in aging pieces in Timo Pukki. I could have told you that was a bad idea. Like, he's a good
Most people
player.
could have told you, yeah.
Right, he's a good player, but like he doesn't fit the league. He doesn't fit the physicality of the league. A player that kind of already had, fallen off a little bit in Europe. Then you're like, we'll bring this guy in. Let's bring in our own Steven Gerrard. Let's bring in our own
Yeah.
Greg Lampard. Let's bring in this guy that's the latter third, latter fifth of his career and hope it works. But yeah, Minnesota, I mean, was Adrian Heath before him? Like, it's kind of a weird thing there. St.
Yeah.
Louis is tough because they've kind of churned through it. Spencer and Seattle, they clearly have a lean into the men's national team mold, which is kind of what FCC wants to do. I'll be really curious to see what Dahlia does in Atlanta this year because he's been given the bankroll more so than he ever has. Can that team stay healthy? Can they stay healthy on turf that has claimed multiple players' seasons? I mean, it is what it is. Ask Miles, ask Brad Guzan. That's kind of the underlyings within the league that are really interesting to watch. And, with the beauty of, Apple TV and having MLS Season Pass, like to be able to tune into this kind of stuff and go, man, it's a Sunday night, my team's play, but now we got Sunday night football. And it's Atlanta and NYCFC from Mercedes-Benz, and the turf's coming out, and there's supposed to be 60,000 people there, but there's 20,000. We're going to tell everybody there's 60,000 people there because it's Atlanta. So, yeah. Long-winded, as always.
Hey, that's why we're always happy to have you on.
I mean,
Makes my life easier when I don't have to do all the talking,
I'm always honest, buddy. I've got thoughts for days, and I'm right more often than I'm wrong, which is good and bad.
Some would say that you're not lying.
Mm-hmm. I'll leave. I appreciate that. Did it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, you can find Nate on the You Ain't Lying podcast if you want to hear more of his takes.
Radically, there will be more cussing, more idiotic takes, but hopefully we do that more often this year. We'll find out. So.
Yeah. Well, hey, in the meantime, though, I'm glad we could get you on to start off the season here, and hopefully some joy for us Cincinnati fans coming up in the next, not just weeks, but months.
I mean, I think honestly could always be worse. Perspective is a thing. I'm not going to reference the Spoons specifically, but even just look at the league, man. Like, we're in a much better spot than most.
Mm-hmm. We could be Spurs fans, could be worse.
Yeah, they could be. Yeah, we could. Lindner could be Daniel Levy, and it could be a dumpster fire. And the word mate can be a pun in itself with Ange. But yeah, I mean, we're not in a bad spot. I think worst case, we're a top 15 team in this league, even with the current roster and the holes we've got. The academy is growing. So yeah, I mean, it's, again, glass half full, optimistic. It's a lot easier that way.
Fair enough. Well, Nate, as always, we appreciate you being on, and I'm sure our listeners appreciate you being on as well. So, just a brief reminder, if you want to follow Nate on social media, he's on there at Nino1, or you could find them on social media under their podcast handle, which I want to say is you know what, I forget it. It's something 513. Nate, what's your podcast handle?
It's German. Zuhas 513 means at home in German. 513.
There you go.
Yeah.
But with that said, not just Cincinnati takes. You can also find him occasionally on the MLS Now podcast. Remember, you can find us on social media at MLS Now podcast. And you can find me, as always, on social media at Mr. Dangerous. Nate and listeners, thank you very much as always. And we'll see you guys on the next preseason episode. Still many more yet to come.
Appreciate you, buddy. Appreciate the time.